Related Papers 30 to 34. The world is after the fact. Time, space, sequentiality. Many of the world's stories describe the human experience as a mountain climb to light and understanding. Others allude to man's progress as a river's flow to the sea, from movement to rest. All the spiritual books of the world include some kind of tree or seed analogy. We find all these examples in Judaism and Christianity. These analogies are types of inverted cosmologies, man's return to Godhead. Now that science has developed the technology to look carefully at the smallest particle and the largest, and now that we are beginning to see and understand the processes by which the microcosm and macrocosm evolve, we perceive that the cosmology outlined by Moses in the Genesis account is remarkably straight. One might wonder how a man could intuit so accurate a progression of events before a science existed capable of splitting an atom or able to peer outward to the very edges of the tangible universe. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. From science's perspective, we see that the release of the free photon, moving light, happened in the first billionth of a second after the Big Bang. Other such precise parallels can be found between the Genesis account and the cosmology of Big Bang. And no doubt more will be discovered. The reader will find some of them for himself in this work. Hoving into view in a different field of science is another cosmological parallel which the cosmologists haven't yet connected to the Genesis account, or even to their own cosmology from other scientific quarters. The scientists who are working with light, laser especially, have discovered the holographic nature of matter. Tangibility seems to be the product of split light, or, to put it another way, the matter we perceive with our senses has its exact opposite, antimatter. Or, to say it more nearly as Moses did, everything that exists in this universe we walk around in has its counterpart in a higher heaven and earth that precedes it. One might say, using the language of the Jewish and Christian Bible, that matter is image. Image of what? Of another image, possibly an image of the image. What precisely is the image? According to Moses, God's own self-image. Moses used a cosmology that began with God and descended or came down to matter and humanity. Present science has reversed the order of this cosmology and is working with its linear accelerators, its great telescopes, and the mathematics that binds them together, moving in the other direction, backward from the tangible evidence of humanity and matter toward the Genesis beginning. Science moves relentlessly back up to the moment of creation, presently called the Big Bang. Listen carefully. The cosmology I have found so meaningful in my own thinking of things is both cosmologies, but with specific rules, like this. We think top-down first. We begin every moment of thought with an ineffable, unknowable, which we simply presume exists, the perfect of perfects, God, wherein there is nothing that works or makes a lie, wherein there is nothing imperfect, no time, no space, nothing but isness, being, allness. Then, from that, we bring our attention down from perfection to perfection's expression here as our personal situation at hand. Right here in the people, places, and things world where we eat and work and do all the ordinary things of living. We begin our every thought process, subliminally at least, with the consciousness of perfection first. We get in the habit of this. Then we come gently to our present state of things in the world to see what we can see. Next, and simultaneously, we look for bottom-up confirmation of isness's good in our personal experiences and in the world. Sometimes one can find this confirmation only in such places as the holy books of the world or in the marvelous discoveries of scientists as they work their cosmological way upward toward the original. But there is always local confirmation of good at hand if we persistently look for it. I say again, I ask those who study with me to think top down, but simultaneously to look for confirmation of God's good in the bottom-up world at every hand, because it is here to see. Essentially, this differs from present religious metaphysical practices in the following way. Rather than constantly deny the reality of matter, we look for the purposes and reasons for its appearance. We see that matter is neither real nor unreal, and it appears in and as our experience for good reasons to be understood. No wonder the metaphysician is having such an unsuccessful time. It is difficult to understand something one is constantly denying, and can't escape no matter how much he declares it isn't really happening. Science is doing better at comprehending the reasons for the appearances than the metaphysician who runs about denying them. Even the rankest absolutist is finally driven to admit he is persistently having to live in the middle of his denial. Now that we have had 100 years of looking at it, the denial of matter has accomplished nothing in the world that elevates or helps the quantum scene. The organizations sprung from the first hopes that the denial of matter would be a saving grace are themselves dead in the water, going nowhere, doing nothing, barely taking care of their own survival. They are doing very little tangibly for their own members, much less for their unenlightened neighbors across the street. No new light has come out of the metaphysical movement of the late 19th century, as anyone can see. If the light were there, it would be seen. Light can't be hidden. This work has introduced the Dashan illustration, the ship and the wake illustration, and half a dozen others for the purpose of explaining how we see material substance that seems very real to us but is not the final reality. The matter we see composing the universe is the image of the real universe, not the real universe itself. For me, this world of human confusion and anguish, pollution and self-destructive terrorism, as well as this world of human love, light and hope, human courage and stamina, human strength and marvel, This entire overspreading of apparent good and evil is like the wake of the ship, all correctly present to confirm the divine ship's passage before in time. You see, the things we see are all following. That is, they are all after the fact. The light we see is actually delayed in time and space. The divine what exists before the image we see. At this time, human eyes are apparently incapable of perceiving the what, but the heart of us can. Even when we look in the mirror, the image we see is after the fact of the awareness of image, which perceives the image in the mirror. Even when I look at the body that types these words, the fingers I see that seem so important in writing this message are not me, but a following image of the awareness within which these words come to be written. Even the body the doctor examined and made grave pronouncements to is not the body I am, but only the image of it. There is a split, billionth of a second between the real I am and the images I perceive within awareness, even my own body. Go ask a cosmologist how much happens with physical particles within the first few thousandths and millionths of a second of their existence. Then ask yourself, if so much can happen in so short a time, how much can happen between my own misconception of identity and my corrected sense of identity? How much can happen between my real body and my perception of the real body in such a fraction of a second? I can tell you how much. The difference between perfection and imperfection. The difference between seeing a troubled and anguished body 1 second and feeling a renewed and vital body in a split instant later. I know this is true because I have lived it true. Now, I strive to stay here in this fanciful world of fiction, following long enough to announce the ship aboard which we all sail in God's justice and dominion. Science has nearly examined the wake of the ship right up to the stern, but science can go no farther than that because of the limits of limited light. However, we, as life, are rightfully aboard the ship when we give God what is God's and give man what is man's. It is our duty to come to understand just how this is so, why it is so, and how it has always been so. Then we are to tell our others so they can perceive these things for themselves and make them their own, just as this is my attempt to tell you. Reader, can you see this simple fact of things following after the fact? If so, you have a most marvelous universe of wonder and amazement soon to open itself to you. The entire purpose of the human experience has been to bring every man to perceive this. I have tried very hard to get this book written while I can. I haven't been able to keep the schedule I had hoped for, amazed at the sheer quantity of light I expected to find words for. I've done the best I could and am confident that others who catch the wisdom spoken of herein will take up where this leaves off and carry the equation back to the home from which it originates. In many ways, I feel like Moses standing right on the edge of the promised land, not quite able to cross the river. I have spent 40 years in the wilderness, trying not to make the mistakes of old, claiming no credit for myself, giving none but to God. What do cosmology, science, and metaphysics have to do with reality? Kaboom. Pearl Harbor Day went kaboom, and 5 battleships were sunk. These years later, we understand about the delay in time that goes kaboom, and we find ourselves making the quantum return to the child within us. It seems a strange relationship, but it has everything to do with truth. Friend Han, since time is relative, time is not real. Truth is not relative. God is absolute, Ho said to the teacher. Oh, why can't God be relative too? Who but the absolutists say that God can only be infinite and not the finite simultaneously? God is relative to me. God relates to me. Han, since time has been proven to be relative and not really real, what is your concern with it? To understand it, then understanding it to be touched and bound by it no longer. We are not bound by it now, countered the absolutist. Are we touched by it? Han asked his old friend. No, we just seem to be. What time is it? Han asked. Half an hour before the others get here for the evening campfire. How did you determine that? I looked at the clock standing in the corner. Oh, and how old are you, friend Ho? You know I'm 80 years old. You have known this for almost all these years. Since our gathering is not touched by time tonight, we will let you explain that. One can explain what one understands. A millionth of a billionth of a second. Since the most recent work at the Fermi Accelerator, scientists are able to tell us that the action which freed the photon to travel took place between a millionth of a billionth of a second and a billionth of a billionth of a second following the Big Bang. If so much can happen in so short a time, how much can happen between the incorrect sense of identity and the correct sense of identity? The body we see with the eyes is not the body that is undelayed by time. With the discovery of the child within, the body and time is benefited immediately. Ho started the firecracker burning and let it explode. The sound echoed from the hills for half a minute. He listened intently as he trudged back to the campfire, where the students sat listening to the echoes also. Lee said, "We saw the flash, then we heard the sound. The sound did not travel as fast as the light." He poked the fire. "Yes," said Han, "that is right. Sound travels more slowly than light. Now, let me ask you if we saw the flash when it happened, or was it delayed in time as the sound was?" "It was delayed also," Lee said. "Light travels quickly, but it is limited. The flash was a microsecond delayed. We saw it nearly instantaneously, but not quite." "Then, what we see and hear is delayed in time?" Han asked. Everyone agreed that it was. The old man smiled and held out his hand. "I see my hand," he says. "Is what I see also delayed in time?" "By such a small amount, it is infinitesimal," the soldier answered. "But it is delayed." Everyone agreed that it was, perhaps by a billionth of a second. Ho returned to the fire, still thinking of the echoing sounds from the firecracker. Did Ho hear the firecracker before we did? Han asked. By the time you heard it, I was 2 steps on my way back, said Ho, sitting down. Han smiled again. He said, If I cross my eyes, I can see my nose. Is what I see delayed in time? Everyone agreed that it was, but less delayed to the one whose nose it was. Then everything I see, hear, feel, smell, and taste is delayed? After such discussion, all agreed it was. Is awareness delayed in time? The old teacher asked. How can one tell? The soldier answered. Awareness has no place to go. It's always here, where I am. Then awareness precedes the images within it, but is concurrent with itself? Everyone agreed it was. Ah, so, smiled Han. Then we agree that there is some distance between the physical body and the awareness that seems to indwell in the body? No one said anything. Let me say this another way, Han continued. If awareness precedes the images it contains, even the very body most central to it, then images are following. Images are after the fact, just as the wake of the ship is after the fact, as the sound of the firecracker is after the flash. Could it be that the body we see and feel is the following image of a body we don't see? With delight, everyone agreed it must be. Then, if we are to agree that this chunk of clay is after the fact, in time following, does it not make sense to find the child ship that makes the tangible universe? A word about prophecy. Predicting the future goes from now to then in linear time. Prophecy goes from now to confirmation, which is to say, from then back to now. Let me explain. Most pragmatic people have a healthy skepticism about biblical prophecy, where virtually anything can be and has been predicted in the name of the Bible's sundry revelations. False prophets, astrologers, necromancers, and soothsayers have been frightening people maliciously for a long time. We have grown accustomed to lurid tabloids heralding this prophet or that one. Predicting the future is not real prophecy. However, though it is easy to confuse these two things. Furthermore, there is a difference between comprehending what prophecy is and the role preachers, priests, and rabbis play trying to convince others what the biblical prophecies are, or what they mean. Samuel, why do you want to talk about prophecy at all? Subjectivism relegates everything that has to do with time to the trash basket. I left the old church because I was so tired of all the talk of prophecy. Subjectivism does no such thing, even if subjectivists do. There is no real comprehension of what time actually is until one discovers subjectivism. Then our subjective mode of mind allows us to understand how prophecy became so important to the lights of the world. It has been important to me to understand about this marvelous thing that has been a part of my life, wherein I have looked for and found certain events happening precisely as I had seen. How can one ignore or dismiss such things? For me, prophecy, as prophecy really is, has come right down to the most marvelously simple and provable thing on earth. The principle is the equivalent of putting seed in the ground, certain that they will be growing apace in a few days. As my skepticism about the prophecies in the Bible lessened, my ability to see what lies behind the art grew, and the mastership of prophecy increased. Now, is it possible to write of it so that the skepticism of others will lessen? I state forthrightly, the anticipation of goods appearing has everything to do with seeing good appear tangibly on the scene where it seems absent. This is what prophecy is all about. Prophecy, as it really is, goes a bit like this. I catch a glimpse. I slowly connect the glimpse to my personal affairs. I look for and see something in the temporal world that confirms the glimpse. Then I look for other external confirmations to see if anyone else has had the near same insight. Often I find that Isaiah, Jeremiah, Jesus, John, and others must have written or spoken about the same glimpse because their words describe something that has just happened in my own temporal affairs, something I had seen earlier in time. Often I can see that certain choices of words in the Bible are virtually the only words that could have been used. Those events add considerably to my respect for the Bible, but they don't make the Bible infallible. They make the awareness, life I am, to which the glimpses come, more nearly infallible. My grandest glimpses have had external confirmation in the Bible. Since the Bible has been reliable so many times, confirming my own internal light about events that didn't happen at the moment or insight, but happened later in my affairs, why shouldn't the Bible continue to be reliable in the matters that haven't happened yet for me? Looking for the confirmation of glimpses is the only kind of prophecy I know about, the only kind that is legitimate as far as I know. When I find a book that confirms so many of the personal events of my life, I feel I can place trust in that book. I hope the book you presently hold in your hands is doing that for you. If one can be less skeptical of prophecy itself and look for the confirmation of his own insights, all his seed will grow in his garden as anticipated. That is the true prophet's work. Yes, I do anticipate certain things, and their happenings are not what the psychologists call self-fulfilling events. They are good coming to light. The world has made such a to-do over prophecy that it has forgotten the simple correlation between the anticipation of light and the arrival of the glimpse inside, and the expectation of confirmation of that event outside. In the like manner, the unaware man doesn't see the same flow in the opposite direction, the way in which tangible events spark glimpses within. These things are the foundation of the equation. Prophecy is the continuation of that same process. Prophecy is the connection, the bridge between the glimpse and the world of people and events. I have never meant more nor less than that. Prophecy is making the outside and the inside into a single one. Prophecy is the anticipation of confirmation. Confirmation of what? Good. I hear it said very often by the churchmen, it seems to me the prophets in the Bible were constantly predicting dire events. Well, they also anticipated the day when the child would be rediscovered, when there would be no more sighing or tears. The chaos they spoke of is the reward of objectivism without subjectivism. The dark night of the soul is the imbalance of subjectivism without an object. Opening the door to infinite possibilities. In early Christian literature, there was an article entitled, Opening the Door to Infinite Possibilities. The author used a term that has become popular in quantum physics today, 75 years later. Infinite possibilities. That's what the new physics speaks of more and more. Among those many possibilities is the real probability of an infinite number of universes. Not just one, but one for every point of view. Glorioski. This concept isn't new. Metaphysicians have long considered the possibility that I, awareness, am the center of my own view of things, for which I am responsible to see correctly. The solipsistic experience opens the door to this subjective view of existence, and once this marvelously expanding concept has been discovered, the ideas and possibility of an infinite number of universes does not seem far-fetched. Subjectivism insists that all the other views are contained right here within this perspective. Spheres within spheres within spheres, so to speak, and they are. The role of the metaphysician may very well be the willingness to allow another possibility to enter his thought, besides the one that has been erroneously evidencing itself. Its entry brings another condition with it, and this appears as the healing. Someone says, I am sick to death, and I open the door once again to the possibility that among the nearly infinite possibilities, I can have an experience in which that same one tells me, I am not sick to death. I am well, prosperous, and happy. Opening our mental door to that possibility is half the healing. In such a situation, the absolute approach is to know and affirm for oneself that no possibility but perfection exists already. Therefore, one accepts no evidence as real, but good. God's perfection as the all and only fact of being here and now. Yet, to be honest here, that is a difficult stance, and it has not stopped those situations from which emerge the words, I am sick to death. Please help me see the sunshine. The absolute position hasn't worked fully in this, my experience. It hasn't stopped the scene's doleful march toward the appearances of a disintegration, death, and decay. As long as this experience includes the sounds of voices asking me to help my others, and since this is my own subjective view of things, it seems to me the work doesn't end with the recognition of God's allness, but ends with the tangible perception of a comforted image out there that isn't calling for help any longer. It doesn't end until my own reflection appears to understand as I understand. Why else have I been given the insight, the words, and a voice to speak? Isn't this a significant purpose of life? In this effort, I am constantly and uncomfortably brought to remember the admonition to heal the sick, even while simultaneously remembering and living the absolute stance that there are no sick to be healed, really. And all this in the knowledge that such a stance hasn't yet ended the appearances of suffering and death in my subjective world. This isn't easy to do. It's darn near impossible. I conclude, therefore, there is still much work for us to do, and things yet to perceive. I tell this to those who ask for my help, albeit I no longer believe all of us will understand everything we are brought to experience. To that extent, I yield patiently to the ineffable, which brings us all, at least it brings me, to humility and trust in the face of death. I yielded to an ineffable beyond the limits of my understanding, and stopped trying to bind God to understanding. The final interface between this awareness of life and God is simple, childlike faith. Faith that a very good God is the faithful custodian of this life which He has brought into existence. That interface has been with us from the beginning. All things else are removed, line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little, until the interface itself is all that is left. It seems good, to me, to understand that the interface, the equation, is all that is real and all that has ever mattered from the beginning. All the events which have been superimposed, including the world of people, with its suffering and appearances of death, become increasingly dreamlike and evanescent when one finally lets go his love for the superimposition and ends his mental separation between life, awareness, and the ineffable Godhead for which it functions. It isn't easy to understand the point here, but it is a significant point, written for those who are intended to reach out and help others through the days ahead. More pertaining to seeing good. A journal entry. Words came in my sleep this morning. If they can be recalled, it would be a wonderful gift to my world. I still hear the gist of them and their significance. It has to do with right doing and what righteousness means. It has to do with godly action and deed. It has to do with those of us who want to do as we are supposed to do. Oh, the words come slowly and sluggishly. I heard a rhythm of sounds saying that we look for good, God, in others, and this is godly action. Looking for truth in books is good, but looking for truth in mankind is better. Looking for wisdom within ourselves is good, but seeing it in mankind is better. To search for truth in disciplines is good, but to look for it and see it in mankind is the true discipline and the reason for our sojourn on earth. God's good is reflected in the good of mankind, and that good is here to be sought and seen. Man is, after all, made originally in the image and likeness of God. The gist is so simple, really. My listening ears want to hear the music of the spheres and voices of thunder, so the simple sounds of truth are ignored. But the secret lies in looking for good. Just that. We look for good in everything, and this is good in action. And there is higher action yet, to look for good in humanity, quantum man. Mankind is the child of God. Righteousness and godliness. God-likeness is seeing good. This is precisely what George Washington Carver did while he held the lowly peanut in his hand. He looked at the thing, examined it carefully, and asked God to show him uses for it beyond the ordinary. Within a few years, he had 100 good uses for that inordinately simple legume that grows in the sandy soil of the South. There is more good in the peanut than meets the eye. We look for the good in everything. It is present to be seen and utilized, but especially we look for the good in our fellow man. The good we see there is the good we see here. Why? We can't see it unless we be it. We recognize the good we are. We are it first, then we see it in others. We were made in the image and likeness of God, all good. And God saw everything he made, and behold, it was very good. When I was in China, I accepted a discipline to do. I went to the village, sat on the corner of the town well, and looked for something good in each person that went to the well for water. It was easy enough to do when a pretty lady came to the well. It wasn't so easy when a dirty, ragged, bound-footed creature struggled to draw water. But I was instructed not to stop until I could see good there. There is something good, for goodness sakes, in everyone. Everyone has a redeeming value hidden somewhere. Somehow, the practice of looking for good in people became a habit. That was my old teacher's hope, I'm sure. In the 45 years since, I have never failed to see it if I looked hard enough, like Mr. Carver's examination of the peanut. Since people are made in the image and likeness of God, to see good in them is to see God in them. To see God in everything is very nearly the reason we're present in and as this experience. And more, there is something mysterious in this simple practice. A great power begins to accumulate around us as we do this. The person we are seeing is helped by that observation as surely as if we had taken him in our arms and washed him clean of trials and anguish. And in the process, we are blessed with a strange and wonderful, I don't know what to call it, power or authority or effluvium or charisma. Whatever it is something very special. It is something mysterious. One does not have to work long at this to find it so, and most wonderful for doing. But hear this, it takes the doing, not the talking about it and speculating about it, analyzing and judging it. The doing. We look for the good in everyone and are blessed by that looking, even as our world is blessed by the same action.